Okay.
Sorry.
So
Okay,
let's,
can you just go through that one more time about the budget? Uh,
okay. Of
because
course, of course,
we're new, we're just getting started, so
of
it's
course, of
very new and I
course.
want to make sure I do it right.
Okay, so I can show you a visual from one of, let's see, here's the agenda page. Hold on one second. Give me one moment. Let me see. Hold on, sample budget. Okay. Okay, so, okay, let me make it a little smaller. Okay. Are you all seeing what's on my screen?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Now, if possible, oftentimes, now last year was not the optimal year. I would probably say, because most of us didn't do much PTA wise last year. We weren't allowed to do a lot of fundraisers, just you may, hopefully, you have access to a 1920 budget or even um an or even an 1819 because remember, we went into COVID March of 2020. So if you have access to past budgets, they are very helpful for your PTA. Why? Because you can see what has been done in the past. You can see more or less where are you ballpark wise from income expenses. So definitely past budgets work and are helpful in developing your current budget. Now, this year, with that said, we're still going to have some restrictions with respect to definitely fundraising. So, with respect to your income, be mindful something that you might have done in the past might not be possible. And of course, the biggest thing that I can think of off the top of my head would be food. Like if in the past you did a lot of after school food sales, depending on how those foods are packaged, that might be an area that you might not be able to do quite yet. But with a budget, the idea is no one person should be doing the budget. It really should be the treasurer can, definitely spearhead this, but you want more than one voice. So definitely a committee, two, three people are very helpful to sort of look at what's happened in the past. What do you want to do this year? What are your goals this year? So if we look at this budget, let's go from the top left. Let's look at income first. So you're always gonna need to know what you had in the bank as of July 1. Where's another place you can go to that? If your audit should have been done. If your audit has not been done, then now will be the time to do it because that's where you're going to get your ending balance of the 2021 school year and what monies you have to be able to start. So next, remember memberships. So memberships is also income. And here you can see we've deducted the $3.50 that needs to be sent to Florida PTA. So really it's the net income minus the dues. Then what are some fundraisers you may have had? Here I've listed, this school does like movies and munchies. They children watch a movie and then they buy snacks for the movie, and that's where the fundraiser comes in. Then there was a spring catalog. So those were some of the one-time events. Then we have, we're a partner with McKesson. So McKesson has their own charitable grants. So these are given, they're really grant monies with no restrictions. And then Coles grants, Coles has not been doing it, since COVID, but how it works, you sign up, Coles has a team, they come out, they work with the kids, and then as a result of their visit, they also do a donation to the school. And then the line below it, just miscellaneous donations. And then this school does have a school store, so that's, over the year, the net profit is what we're thinking. So the total income with the carryover is that bottom line, the 23,850. And then we go over to the expenses. So hospitality, is a larger expense, and that's hospitality for the teachers. We have our council dues, and then the PTA in this school purchases the visitor passes. That's one thing that we do actually in this school, we do both, but most schools are now just using the Raptor, so they don't have to purchase visitor passes any longer. This PTA also assists in the paying for the accelerated reader license. The Yacker Tracker is a lunch program where the children get incentives for their behavior in the cafeteria. Same thing for perfect attendance. Those classes with perfect attendance get a monthly incentive. And then the character education is really the Values Matter program that the counselors do. So that's monies to help them purchase supplies to support that program. And then for the accelerated reader, they do quarterly incentive. It's like one day, those students that have met their AR goals, that's monies for treats or what have you. And then the single events, you can see beautification is for the school. Um, Professional development food is those days that are non-opt. This school purchases breakfast for the teachers. Then we do a spaghetti dinner for the parents. We usually tag it with some sort of program. So those monies are to pay for the dinner. Teacher of the Year gifts, red ribbon, those are supplies. And then we had a donation from a parent to purchase our electric marquee. So that's why PTA is paying the maintenance on the marquee. And then teacher appreciation. And then we have FSA t-shirts and then incentives for the upper academy. And then the last thing is always have like a miscellaneous line because you will have expenses that might not fit into a category. And then basically, obviously, the most important thing is that your income is greater than your expenses. So here we're then leaving close 3,400, which is similar to what was carried over from the previous year. So that is a relatively simple budget. You can cater your budget to your school. Is that helpful with the budget piece to see an example? Do you have questions about that?
I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay, so this is probably, now, I said before we have 3 general meetings a year. At your first general meeting, you should be passing your budget. Why? Because you really are not allowed to spend any money until your budget is passed. Your general membership gets a say on how you spend your monies. For the most part, this is a simple process, but your members do get a say. The second general meeting, which usually occurs in January, it could occur as late as February. The main purpose for that is to elect your nominating committee for your elections, which will then be your third general meeting, which will occur likely May. Some may do it in June. But if you have that nominating committee, they're able to develop the slate of officers to allow your election meeting hopefully to run smoother. So those are the reasons we have 3 meetings, and those are the highlights for each of the meetings. Let me show you. We were talking about calendars earlier. One of the benefits of the calendar is the next few pages that I'm going to show you, they are all in the back of the calendar, okay? So what I wanted to focus on here, although parliamentary tips are important, I really wanted to show you a sample agenda so that you would know, okay, well, what's going to happen exactly at this general meeting? So there needs to be a call to order. Usually that would be the president who calls the meeting to order. The Pledge of
Jane, you're not
Allegiance.
sharing? Did you intend to share?
Oh, can you see it or no?
No, we can't see it.
Oh, my apologies. Give me a moment. So sorry, I'm talking from a page no one else can see. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so the first thing that's highlighted is the call to order, the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, if you have to do a roll call, you can. Usually for this first general meeting, what is done is another introduction of the current board. So in other words, the people in the room may not have been there last year. This is the chance for you to introduce your board. And also, usually at this point, the principal is there. Usually we have the principal also give a welcome. Then the next piece is the reading of the minutes. Now, the minutes that we would be speaking of should be the last general meeting minutes of the school year. So if you had a general meeting in May, June, when you did your elections, you're going to share that with your members. And then they're going to have the opportunity to, make any edits or to approve the minutes as they were read.
Chrisanne,
Then,
there's a question. Does the secretary read the minutes?
usually it is the secretary that reads the minutes. I mean, we all have some people, not all are, sometimes the secretary is shy. If they don't want to read the minutes and they choose someone else, that's completely acceptable. But of course, any corrections, the secretary will make those corrections.
The next
Now,
question is, can the minutes be shown as a slide? I can tell you
yes,
that I do that. I go, if there's no objection, I will not read the minutes. You can see them on the slide.
correct,
And
correct,
as long as no one objects, don't read them.
correct. Now, the next thing says correspondence. If there's any correspondence, there may not be. And not every unit has both a recording secretary and a corresponding secretary. Usually that is for larger units. So if your PTA does not have both a recording and a corresponding secretary, then the recording secretary would also read the correspondence. And then next would be the treasurer's report. So here, the treasurer's report is basically, this one's a little different because usually it would be, you're going to report from end of year to what's in the account now. So they can do one of several things. And what I have, let me stop sharing this screen for a moment, only because I think the treasurer's part, you do sort of have to see it.
While you're looking for that, Chris Ann, let me answer the question that came in. Can you share some examples of correspondence? Yeah, you're going to see an example of correspondence at the county council's general meeting. We got a letter from the IRS, so y'all need to know that. So correspondence is typically anything that comes from an important source, an important correspondence, or maybe even just a letter of thanks.
Thanks. Also, resignations would be another one if you have anyone resigning
Correct.
from the board. Okay, so are you seeing the slide that says treasurer's suggestion page?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so here you can delineate basically the budget is for the entire year. The treasurer is going to report to the board on a monthly basis. So on a monthly basis, you're going to get an itemized income expense from what occurred solely during that month period. Now, as we said, the general meetings are only going to happen 3 times a year. So the treasurer really would be breaking down, and you can do it as detailed, you know, as needed, or, here you can see it sort of general. But nevertheless, you're reporting to your members how the money is being spent. And how the money is being spent should also align with the budget that you wrote. So that's important. And this is a way for the membership to see that that's actually occurring. So you can see they're going to report on, and how you're going to do it is just like this. Most units will just show a slide. Just like you can show a slide for the minutes, you can show a slide for the treasurer's report. And then the treasurer's just going to report amount on hand, any income that came in, any expenses that occurred, and then what is the ending balance, if that makes sense. So that's the general idea of what the treasurer should be reporting at the meeting, at the general meeting. Now here it is saying, okay, and how the treasurer can use a number of different ways to keep track. This is indicating here where it says has a line for each item. What that's trying to correspond to is, and this I would say is more reserved for larger budgets that have many lines. So basically, line, whatever, 100 is office supplies. So that's going to be an expense. So that's what it's saying. Not only are you giving the money, the monetary amount, you can also pair it with the line item. But for PTAs that are smaller, you may not have a line item, and that's fine, just the amount. But you can put the account or what you called it on the budget. Okay, I called it office supplies, so that's how that works. That's the pairing of the budget to the treasurer's report. Let me move down so you can see. Okay, so here, balance on hand, as I said, any income, total income, and then you have expenses, the total expenses, and then what is the balance on hand. And the balance on hand should match what the bank is saying that you have. Now, what you can do, best practices, is within your board, yes, the treasurer is going to see the monthly statement. Obviously, the president sees the monthly statement. You can have someone else look at that monthly statement that is on your board, but that is not a signer on the account. And then they just initial the printed out copy. I know most of us just have online statements, but you still can have another person just initial that they've reviewed it as well. These best practices help you because it really having more eyes on the monies, less likelihood of something being off or expenses occurring that shouldn't be, income coming in that you're not sure where. So it's just a best practice to really make sure the statement is being reviewed monthly and the treasurer is sharing that information at the board meetings as well as at a general meeting. Any questions about the treasurer? Let me see. I think there's some. Hold on. Sorry. And here, just some whatever tips. Have at least 3 names on the bank account. Why 3 names? 2 are required for each check. The third signer is just, you can't find signer A, you go and find signer B. So that ensures that each check is signed twice. And then here, as I've mentioned, give a monthly treasurer's report, and then a copy goes to the secretary. And then, of course, an annual audit needs to be done in order at, anytime after June 30th to review the books from the previous years. And then always get receipts and make deposits immediately. So those are just some helpful tips on treasury. Let me go back. Are there questions, Sandra? Oh, I can't hear you, Sandra. I can't hear you.
Oops, my fault this time. I was on mute. One question. So on the first meeting, this is where we vote for the budget, correct?
Correct.
Next question, who audits? Well, Margaret, I wish you joined our auditing class a couple of weeks ago, but the auditors need to be 3 non-check signers. They should be voted on by the board, not just appointed by the president. 3 non-check signers.
And they don't have to be 3 board members. They can, be anyone. For some of you smaller units, I know we've often done partnerships. So you can call another PTA, and flip-flop. So just something to think about.
Because if you're having trouble finding auditors, probably your neighboring PTA at the school down the street is probably having the same problem. So why don't you review their books and they review yours? And then the next question is, so the treasurer can present this suggested report page to all the members at the general meeting? Yeah. A basic treasurer's report, guys, is what you had to start with at the beginning of the month, what you took in, what you spent out, what's left at the end of the month. If they cannot get all that budget detail, at least they need to be presenting the basics. Do not go a meeting without a treasurer's report. Because believe me, it is one of the biggest red flags to a problem, is if you go a couple of meetings without a treasurer's report, find out why. Chrisanne,
Yes.
let me share my screen.
Oh,
Something that no one's asked is, how often should I have our general meetings? And how much time do I have to give them for notice? Well, guys, this is where you need to go back to your bylaws. Page 3 of the bylaws, Article 8, general membership meetings. So right here, I'm going to highlight it. Everybody's bylaws are just a tiny bit different. Regular meetings shall be held how many times a year? It has to be at least 3 for the reasons that Dr. Fortick gave you already. You got to do budget, you got to do nominating committee, you got to do election. How many days notice do you give? It's in your bylaws. Some of you have anything from 2 days all the way up to 10 days. I don't think I've seen over 10 days, but I can't tell you what your notification is without knowing which school you're with. It does say meetings may be conducted in person, by conference call, teleconference, or other electronic media as permitted by applicable law. So in the state of Florida, we are allowed to have electronic meetings. You cannot vote by text-based mediums such as email or text. And I will get into the way to vote on a Zoom meeting. You can also have a special meeting. If you need a meeting because you got to add something to your budget that wasn't expected, there's usually a shorter notice required for a special meeting. And then that last regular meeting is your annual meeting and your election. Also, you have how many people need to be there to call it a meeting. You need to have 10 members typically. I don't think there are very many local units out there with a number other than 10 in section 4. So 10 paid members to call it a meeting and you have to have invited everybody, but at least 10 need to show up. How about electronic signatures? Is that acceptable? Not on bylaws or audits. Electronic signatures are not acceptable on bylaws or audits. So I hope that answers that question. All right, Dr. Fortick, back to you.
Okay, so let's go back. I pulled us out of the agenda. So now I'm sharing that page again. So we were on treasurer's report. So that occurred. Next would be any new business. So for this general meeting, this is when the approval of the budget would occur. Also, new business at this meeting would be if you indeed did your audit, a member of the audit committee can report on the audit. Basically, with that, what they're reporting, it's not necessary to share that screen of the 2-page audit that was done. Really, the person is just going to speak. If the books were reviewed, no concerns were found, then that's what they report. If there are some recommendations that the audit committee have, they can report on those. So those would be the 2 sort of highlights for this upcoming meeting: reporting on the audit and then passing the budget. And so the next would be any reports from the various board members. So they can give a status of what has occurred since they have been in office, which likely would have been the end of the school year. And then depending on how large your PTA is, many of you may not have standing committees. So that wouldn't be standing or special committees. Standing committees, let me start with special. Special committee is, say you have a big event and you have a chairperson for your 8th grade graduation or your 5th grade graduation. That would be a special committee. A standing committee would be one that is going to run throughout the year. I'm trying to think of a good example of a standing committee, Sandra. What would you say that a local unit may have?
Standing committee on a local level would be an advocacy committee.
Okay, so if you have an advocacy committee, okay. And then special orders would be any anything that may be, okay, so like creating a, a special committee is a special order, correct?
Or special orders can also be things that are expected to happen at certain times. For example, for the county council, our special orders for October will be electing to our nominating committee.
Okay. Okay.
Most local units don't have policies that specify which meeting certain things happen at.
Okay. And then just any unfinished business, meaning it was any business that was not resolved at the last general meeting. So that would be at the meeting in May, if the minutes denoted that something still was unresolved, this is where it should be addressed. And then if any of the correspondences that were read up above required an action. So in other words, if you had to then vote on something that the correspondence was asking, that's where that occurs. And then finally, any announcements, and then the meeting is adjourned. So that's a typical agenda. The other thing that often occurs, at least on the local level, usually the president is going to take a few minutes either at the end or the beginning to, welcome, tell the members something about him or herself, maybe sort of tell the vision of what they're looking for this coming year, some of the highlights, some of the areas they may want to target. So knowing that this may be the first time that your members are seeing you, it's the opportunity also for you to sort of lay out the year, generally, not specifics. I see that often occur at that initial general meeting because you're wanting the members to get to know you, and also you're going to be explaining ways that they can become involved in the PTA. Membership, of course, but then if they want to volunteer, you know, that can be addressed. And if it's sending them to Member Hub, if it's talking with them after the meeting, it just depends on, your unit, how many people you have on the Zoom, how many people you have in person. So that can vary from unit to unit. So that's the agenda. Um, the last slide, are there any questions about what we talked about with respect to the the flow of the meeting or the items that are discussed in the meeting?
The question is do we need to make a motion to approve the budget or just vote?
No, you make a motion to approve the budget.
And do the treasurer talk about the approval of the budget while giving the report or later on?
Okay, so usually you give the treasurer's report, sort of where we are right now, that monthly report, or from May to where we are now at the beginning of the meeting, and then you wait till you get to new business to do the budget.
I will tell you that in the county council's general meeting coming up, we will do the treasurer's report, we will do the audit report, and then we will go straight into the budget. Just to keep all of the financial stuff together.
Yes.
So then you can put that little accounting brain cell away.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
well, Chrisanne, one of the things that we do need to cover, I just want to remind you, is how to vote in a Zoom meeting.
Okay, so take a moment because the slide that I was going to show next was just a sample minute. So this is more important because people are going to be needing to do this.
So voting in a Zoom meeting does get to be a little more, you have to do a little more preparation than just credentialing at a live meeting and going, oh, Cecilia Santiago, you're a member. Here, you get a voting delegate card. And you get to be like Oprah. You get a voting delegate card. And you get a voting delegate card. But at a Zoom meeting, you got to be a little bit more prepared. So I always do registration. You notice you had to register for this meeting. And one of the reasons is so you know who's in the meeting. By registering for this meeting, the only way you got the link is for you to provide to me your email address. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross-check that against my membership. I've got Flavia Hayuna here, and Flavia's from Michael Crop. I'm going to check and see whether Michael Crop is in good standing. And now I know that Flavia has the right to vote in my meeting. And when it comes time to vote, if the vote is not controversial, in other words, I'm not expecting, there to be any dissent. All those in favor of adopting the audit, please unmute and say aye. Everybody says aye. Great. Please unmute and say no. Not too many say no. Good. I know for a fact the majority said aye, and I have enough people. But if it's going to be controversial, if I am voting on, is it Dr. Chrisanne Fordix running against Karen Grace, and I need to prepare a poll to do that, then I need to make sure that everybody voting on that poll is definitely a member of my PTA, because I don't want anybody voting who has not been a member for 30 days. So what do I need to do? I need to either preset you to a breakout room, or I need to move people who are not members back into the waiting room. And at least one person who's on this call has experienced that. The other day when we had our board meeting, Miss Mary Reeves was elected to DEI chair. During the election, she was moved to the waiting room to wait so that she couldn't vote for herself because she wasn't a credentialed board member yet. So that works when there's only a few, but when you have a large meeting, again, pre-registration is key. Then you can preset the breakout room so that you can do a specific poll just to those who are eligible to vote. If you have a particularly large PTA, one of the ways that you can do the voting is via electronic means like e-ballot, or I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I can't remember, but there's several different new electronic things. They do cost money. We had a subscription to e-ballot. I used it twice in a year. I didn't think spending your money, $19 every single month, was worth using it twice. But it came in very handy when I had no choice but to vote electronically. So you've got to plan that out. If you're doing a Zoom meeting, you need to have a plan on how you're going to vote. On our upcoming general meeting for county council, my plan is to just do the consensus and to count my credentialing, in other words, how many actual voting members I have based on our registration. Any questions about electronic voting? I've just Dr. Fordick has placed in the chat all the forms that she has shared with us today so that you can download them. And we do have a question. If we have the executive board in place but have other open positions, can we slate from the floor at the same meeting where we are approving the budget? So let me see if I understand this right. Christine, can you unmute? Christine, you've already elected your executive board last spring?
Sorry about that. Yes, well, it's going to be the same board that's in place. Actually, our treasurer has passed her 2-year mark, so that would mean that she could.
Christine, all
Yes.
officers are elected annually. Nobody just stays.
Okay, then we'll have to,
You have to have an election.
an election. Okay, so then so then the budget cannot be approved at that same meeting?
You can, but I would have the election first. And then, make sure that the new board also agrees to, has a chance to look at the budget. That's the problem. You can't obligate somebody who's not yet elected.
Right, I understand. Okay. Okay, yeah, we're gonna be revising our budget in the coming week. So, and we'll
Okay.
have a committee for that. So it
Sounds
won't
good.
be just, okay.
But you
All right,
do
thank you.
have to have a full election. Florida PTA has been very clear on this.
Mhm.
We've got to be able to continue business even in COVID. So
Okay.
last year, we kind of didn't chase after people if they didn't have their elections. But if your PTA is still doing business, you've got to have an election.
Okay,
Everybody has
because
to be legally elected.
we moved our election to the beginning of this year because last year when we tried to form a nominating committee, nobody showed up to the general meeting. So
I understand.
we had to we forfeited our final meeting, our final general meeting, since the participation at the first meeting was basically the board and a couple of other parents.
So
And then, so we're having the election now
I
after
understand,
open house.
Christine. Let me tell you what my school did. We had our general meeting with our election, and we had people prepared to run for those offices. So we had already prepared a budget amongst those people. Everybody got voted in who was prepared to be voted in. And as soon as we were voted in, the president turned around and said to the treasurer, "Are you prepared to offer a budget?" And the treasurer had already prepared a budget to be offered so that we could get both pieces of business out of the way.
Okay. Okay.
All right, Dr. Fordick.
Okay, so let me see. So far, oh, we only have a few minutes left. Okay, so the only other thing I wanted to show you, it is one of the slides that is in the chat, but it just is the sample minutes. If you have a newer secretary, um, this is basically, it goes through the agenda that we just talked about. So that can be helpful, especially if your secretary is new, having a template. Again, it was shared in the chat. If you have the PTA calendar from Advocates, it's back there. But this can help you in drafting the minutes, as well as really the minutes really partner with the agenda. So it really also helps you with that as well in developing the agenda for the next month. So that's the minutes. And then the last slide was, if indeed you are going to have elections, and full disclosure, this handout comes from PTA, or from California PTA. And so these are specifically from San Diego, but it's nice in the sense of the first page gives you, if you have a slate already developed, you already have your officers who you're proposing, and then it goes on the next page. If you indeed do have to have a ballot vote, how you would go about doing that. So I won't go through it, but there's a reference to you to sort of help you in developing how to go about doing an election if that is something you need to do. Okay, any questions?
I found a question that we missed
Oh, sorry.
on, let's see. If you're having a dual modality meeting, do only those in person vote?
No, both need to be able to vote. So if you're going to do a hybrid meeting, you really are going to have your board help you with this, because the same person is not going to be able to focus on both. You need to have someone focusing on who's live, and then, as Sandra described, how to go ahead and do voting on Zoom. Someone is going to have to be responsible for doing that on the computer. And then, you're going to have to give time, if need be, to do the tallying.
Someone's asking what the program is to vote on Zoom. You can either use the poll feature within Zoom itself, or if you need something a little more sophisticated, you can purchase e-ballot is one. I've also seen a few other. I literally Googled electronic voting, and there you will get several suggestions. E-ballot I thought was the simplest to use, but it is expensive. It is between $17 and $19 a month, and you have to sign up for a year. You can't just sign up for one use. So if you're only going to be using it once, I suggest you look for something that allows you to use it only once and not have to sign up for a whole year. Somebody asked, where's the calendar? I will repost the link for purchasing the calendar. The calendar is a product of Advocates PTA, which is our countywide community PTA, and they have been producing this calendar. Well, the calendar's been produced for 27 years now, Karen, is that correct?
Yeah, quite a long time.
Quite a long time.
Quite a long time.
It was originally produced by the county council. Then somewhere along the line, we stopped producing it. It's been produced by North Miami Beach High School. It is produced by Advocates PTA. And they use the funds that come from selling that calendar to fund their activities as well as scholarships. Is that the planner? Yeah, that's the academic calendar planner that has been around for 27 years now. And in the back of it is those 3 pages, which we will share with you, that give you tips. All right, it is approaching 8 o'clock. We could probably go on for another hour easily, but we want to respect your time. I am looking for suggestions. What do you guys want us to teach on Tuesday nights? Now, coming up September 18th, we are having our annual Building Leaders Today, BLT. This we've had in the past, we would all go down to a local school on a Saturday. I'd feed you breakfast, I'd feed you lunch. I'd let you meet some vendors, and we would get trained in between. Presidents, treasurers, secretaries, School of Excellence, reflections, mental health is going to be one of our topics. Family literacy. We've got a big family literacy event that we're doing every month, as well as everything you can imagine to get your job done in PTA. We will be having 2 workshop sessions. I think there's 6 to 7 workshops per session simultaneously. You do need to sign up for each workshop separately, and that email should be coming out very soon. In between, we will have vendors, right, Karen?
Yes.
So we're going to have games, prizes with the vendors in between the workshops so that you guys can talk to them about possible fundraising, as well as get some swag. So, ladies and gentlemen, I very much appreciate you joining us this evening. Dr. Fordick has put her contact information in the chat box. If you have any questions, she's available. And we hope that you guys have, I'm looking back to make sure we've covered all of our questions. I think we have. And have a great evening, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, 3 new messages. You're welcome. Next week, fundraising with Member Hub. We're bringing Valerie back in case you joined us last week. She's coming back next week to cover fundraising with that Member Hub. Now, if you missed Valerie last week, she is going to be on topic Get Engaged Wednesdays with Florida PTA tomorrow. So the Member Hub 101 class that we had last week is going to be repeated by Florida PTA tomorrow, both at noon and at 7 p.m. So we hope that you'll join us. Bye.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.